How'd that happen? Just, I don't know.
Robbie.
Over the
Microsoft, the advertising. So all of a sudden it's very around Israel with Netanyahu. You know that?
What?
Elon Musk went to Israel, to the Gaza border, and he spent a few days there. And he said the nicest things. He's so on side now. He's our biggest friend now. But the thing is that
So money
there's been a lot of talk. Why
No.
this
Can't the
happened.
advertisers go and get stuffed?
And I was saying I think that it's deep down in a lot of people. They don't think about it, and just a silly thing comes out, and it rises to the surface. But when the more intelligent people think about it and speak about it, and we rationalise it, and we get them on side through friendship, then all of a sudden it's suppressed again.
A bit.
No, Robert,
if
the
I get time,
intellectuals are the one who are pushing it this time.
if I get time, I'll tell you something about it in this year. I don't know that we will get. Okay, so we should start. It's parashat VAYEISHEV, and I was going to
pushing it this time.
the sikha that I was going to learn with everybody requires some vocabulary which I didn't know whether I didn't know how to go about it, because it's a bit tough to know where everybody's holding in their learning, and especially now that this tape goes out to so many people, and there's this television thing, the YouTube thing, so it's hard to know whether it leaves people behind or not. But what I'd like to do once and for all is take you through three of the absolute basic building blocks in Kabbalah, which are referred to over and over again, and people will sagely nod their heads and pretend they know what it means, and I suggest to you that a lot of people don't, and I thought we'd learn it as a prelude to the shir. So there are three concepts that I want to talk to you about. One is the concept of oiros in kalim. That means lights in vessels. I'll come back and go through this. But these are the names. The second thing is this concept of toihu and tikkun, which we'll also come back to and go through. And the third thing is the four worlds. There are four worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya. Those four worlds. And those three areas in Kabbalah find their way into a great deal of Chassidus, and really without understanding that, you would not have a chance to understand the Chassidus on this week's parashat VAYEISHEV. And I just tell you the two things we're going to be talking about. The first thing that we're going to be talking about is that Yaakov Avinu, when he gets back finally to Israel, he's been in Haran, he's elevated many sparks that are in Haran. He's met with Esav. Esav didn't kill him. They didn't bring Mashiach as though he hoped that they would, which we might get time to come to. But he then asks Hashem for shalva. He asks Hashem for peace. For peace. He says, I've had a really tough life, which he had. He had a terrible tough life. And he asks Hashem for peace, and we are told that that wasn't a good thing to do, and that Hashem not was angry with him, but then there was a negative consequence of that, a series of negative consequences. What? That Yosef, his son, his beloved, special, terrific son, went through hell and back. I mean, he was hated by his brothers, he was sold into slavery, he was thrown into a dungeon, and then finally became viceroy of Mitzrayim. So, and this reads like a children's story, because the whole thing really strains one's credibility. And without understanding the Hasidus of this, because everything has a level of a body and a soul, and Torah has a body and a soul. And it's one thing to be acquainted with the body, which is very important in Torah, but without the soul, it's very much more difficult to relate to and to personally grow. So that's one of the things that we're going to be learning about Yaakov and wanting this peace, and why that was not given to him, although it was at some level. We're going to learn that too. But the second inyan, the second concept that we need to address is the whole story of this jealousy by the brothers. I mean, you have to understand who we're talking about. We're talking about the leaders of the 12 Shvatim, the leaders of the 12 tribes of Am Yisrael, who are historically going to be the heads of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are divided into 12 different emotional groups, each represented by one of these Shvatim. We're told that each of the Shvatim are they're tzaddikim, and yet these tzaddikim are jealous of their brother, want to kill him, then don't want to kill him, sell him into slavery. How do you make sense of any of this? And to make sense of any of it, unfortunately, you've got to access some really heavy-duty Hasidus, but to access that heavy-duty Hasidus without the vocabulary, it's impossible. So I need you to be a bit patient, and I want to take you through these three things that I mentioned, because they're critical to understanding not only this Sedra, and not only the questions in this Sedra, but your own perspectives in your relationship with your God and your spiritual life compared to your physical life. So let's start with Oris and Kalim. Oris and Kalim means light and vessels. There is a fundamental dynamic in creation. Why Hashem chose that way, that's not our business. That's what it's our job to notice it and to work with it. There is a fundamental dynamic in creation, that there is light and there is vessels that house that light. And that is repeated as a dynamic throughout everything. You have a light, in a light bulb, you've got to have a bulb to house the light. If light shines in a room, you have to have walls to reflect the light, because light itself has everybody knows the physics of this. You can't see light. Light is invisible. The properties of light, which bewilder scientists today, for anyone who remembers their school day physics, nobody knows still whether light is particles or whether it's waves, and whether it's a combination. Vic will tell you this better than me, but light is a bewildering piece of physicality, which at the moment still defies real scientific conclusions. However, everybody has agreed, scientists or 5-year-olds, that for a light to be effective, it needs to be housed by something. It needs to. So if the sun is shining through the heavens are black, they're dark, but the moment there is the face of the moon or an object, then that's picked up by the light. So you need the light, and you need the light needs the keli needs the light. That relationship of light and keli exists over and over again in every part of your and my life. So let me give you an example. The neshama is the light, the guf is the body is the keli. You want to drink liquid, you pour the liquid into a keli. You want to make kiddush, you need a kiddush cup. The wine on its own, the wine on its own is useless. You need something to house the wine, either the bottle or the kiddush cup or whatever it is. And so light on its own is an unbelievable koyach, but it needs the mate of the Kali to make that light visible. And that's the whole point of light, to be visible. So that's Oiros and Kali. And the Oya, the light, and the Kali have to be corresponding. So if the Kali is inappropriate for the light, then you get no light and you get no reception of that light. I'll give you an example. Our eyes see light rays. Our ears pick up sound waves. If you can't pick up sound waves with your eyes, and you can't pick up light with your ears. Why? Not because there isn't a light, but there isn't a corresponding Kali to catch that energy. So you have an energy and you have a receptacle for that energy. And that's true in all creation, right across the board, whatever we're talking about. So that's piece number one. Piece number two is there is a concept of two states, Tohu and Tikkun. Very important to understand this. Tohu means, it says, Bereshit bara Elokim es hashamayim. In the beginning God creates the heavens and the earth, and in the beginning the world was Tohu v'vohu, it says. Tohu means explodedly mixed up, totally confused and mixed up. And it's explained that in Kabbalah and taken into Hasidus, that what it is that is totally mixed up are the midos, are the emotions, the source of the emotions. So the source of kindness is Hesed, the source of strictness, of discipline, is Gevura. Now, in Tohu, the Chesed and the Gevura cannot tolerate each other. So there are seven emotions, 6 emotions in Malchus. Let's keep it easy and say 7, and 3 intellectual ones, so that we have 10 spheres altogether. And those 10 spheres in Tohu have no boundaries. And so they smash into each other and break each other and wreck each other and ruin each other. And then there is the state of what's called tikkun, where that is repaired. In the state of Tohu, the light, we're going back to light and kalim, the light is stronger than the kalim, so the kalim break. In tikkun, the kalim are stronger than the light, so the light is housed properly in an orderly fashion, right? And again, this goes through the whole of creation. So if you have a man who marries a woman, and the woman is not introduced to the fact that he has for example, wild temper, he's going to smash her life, because it'll start with a fight and start with another fight and then another fight, and then he'll become violent and he'll forgive her, she'll forgive him. This is typically the dynamic, and then he beats her up again and she forgives him again, then he beats him up again, and now she's got no choice, she's got nowhere to go, she's got no income, she's got no support group, etc., etc. So when the oiros are too wild, it's no good. On the other hand, if the kalim are too strong, if she is too controlling, if she is too demanding, if she is too emasculating, then his light won't shine, and he has no opportunity to flower and grow. And if you want a good marriage, then, and unfortunately kids aren't taught this, it needs to be appreciated that each party's oil has to be sufficient to light up the other person's kalim. But the kalim can't be too strong to deny the light, and the light can't be too strong to deny that person. So you get one person married to another person where one person is very gifted and the other person is very submissive. And sooner or later, the person's light totally crushes their kalim to the point that women, it's a common thing. When I used to do family law 100 years ago, I didn't do it for long, but you'd get women who would complain that they just had no identity left after 5 or 7 years. And they have no identity left for this reason, that they don't understand this relationship of Oyer and Kaylee, and Toyu and Tikkun. And Toyu is the world where things are allowed to go wild without boundaries, and Tikkun is boundaries, but you've got to be very careful that the boundaries are not such that they snuff out the light altogether. That's the second thing I need to have on board with you. The third thing is much harder. The third thing is that when Hashem created the world, he didn't just create, he created the world, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'es haaretz, and the process was, we haven't got time to go through it, but I'll just, for those who are more experienced and who are listening to the tape, there was before creation, before in inverted commas, because time is a created piece of Gashmias, but let's talk about, and in Torah you would talk about levels, but it's simpler to think in terms of time. So before there was creation, there was simply godly light. And that godly light is infinite and eclipsed absolutely everything. So there was no chance for there to be any concept of individuality, separateness. There was no such thing. In order to create a possibility for the concept of separateness, individuality, Hashem went through what's called a Tzimtzum Rishon, which means the first Tzimtzum means a contraction. He contracted himself, as it were, making a space, a mokum panoim, which means a vacuum, into which his light was removed. And since the light was removed, it was then possible to begin to introduce into that vacant space the concept of separateness. That's a really big oversimplification of everything, but I need to get you to this point to understand this. That after that Tzimtzum, then there was Hashem introduced into that vacant space a thing called the Kav, which is a path of light, a much lower voltage light, and that's where the creative process began. Now, then that creative process went through what's called Seder Istalshelus. Seder Istalshelus means cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, down a chain like... because until there's no cause. You have to understand this. We believe in yesh ma'ayin, something out of nothing. There was nothing. There was no Gashmias. There wasn't a cause for the Gashmias. There was no cause. There was nothing. I quote in one of the books that there's a famous story in Hasidus that when they brought Chaim Yankel in Russia to see the first locomotive, and he came and he saw the engine, and the locomotive went on its own, right? Steam on its own. And they asked him, was he impressed? And he said, not really. Why not? He said, well, there's a horse in there. And they said, but where? There's no room for a horse. He said, it's a very little horse. They said, but how can it pull the whole train? He said, it's a very little horse, but it's a very strong horse. But there had to be a horse. He couldn't get the idea that the train could move without a horse. We have great difficulty in understanding yesh ma'ayin because we have no experience of it at all. Everything that we experience is cause and effect. Cause and effect started only after the Simson Rishon and after the Kav, etc., etc. And that cause and effect is in 4 worlds. I just need to take you through these 4 worlds quickly. There's Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. They are the 4 worlds. I'm going to try and give you a mashal that was given to me by a teacher that I never forget how brilliant I thought this was then, and I still do. This is 50 years ago. He explained it to me like this. First of all, let me just preface it by something everybody knows. Why did Hashem create the world? To make a dira b'tat toilet, to make a dwelling place in Gashmis, which is impossible because the moment Hashem is revealed, you get light which eclipses everything, and what happened to the Tzimtzum? Humanity has to make that dira b'tat toilet, that dwelling place. So the moshel that I got from this teacher for these 4 worlds is a building. And that's why it's such a brilliant moshel. So let me explain to you. Let's pretend you want to build a house. You want a house. So you picture the house. Right? And your wife says to you, what's the house like? And you're ready to describe it. You haven't described it yet, but it's in your head. Right? I want to ask you a question. Has something happened that didn't exist before? So the answer is yes. Your vision of the house is new. It wasn't there before, correct? But there's no house. There's no Gashmias. There's no house in any way other than the fact that somewhere in your consciousness is your own private idea of the house. But can you say that there's nothing? You can't say there's nothing because something has happened that wasn't there before, namely your vision of the house. So that's Atzilus. Atzilus is that level, the first level in Seder Histalshelus where there is only godliness. Is it the same godliness that was before the Tzimtzum? No, because now there is the idea of creation. But there's nothing there to touch. There's nothing there to grab. There's nothing. So go back to the moshel and you explain to your wife how you'd like the house, and you call in an architect, and the architect draws up a set of plans. Now there's something in existence. There's something tangible. There's no house. There's a piece of paper with drawing on it, but there is something now tangible. The plan is tangible. You can see it, you can measure it, you can imagine it, but there's no house. Right? So that is Bria. Then you call in the builders, and the builders put up the walls and the roof and the structure. Now, for the first time, you have the beginnings of a 3-dimensional house that wasn't there before. That's the next level. And then you have, and that's called Yetzirah. And then the final level, which is Asiya, which is Olam Hazeh, which is the world we live in, is where you call in the guys to do the finishing. Right? The electricians, the plumbers, they have to connect the water, they have to connect the electricity to the street, they have to, I don't know what I'm talking about, but and what happens? You get a group of people, and they know better. They know better than the architect. The builder says, and the plans say that you've got to take the water from the street all the way around the back of the house and around here to here. And the plumber says, "What are you talking about? Well, I don't need to do that. I'll take the water from there and I'll take it straight to here." Right? And he puts the pipe from there to here, and that's no good. He puts the pipe from there to here, and it doesn't work. It's not going to work like that. And the electrician messes that thing up, and this one messes this one up, and then you need what's called tikkun ha'olam. You need to fix the world. Hashem gave us a perfect world, at the lowest level. All our job is to finish it, and we get it wrong. We get it seriously wrong. And that's what the phrase, you must have heard it, tikkun olam, means to fix the world. And people ruin the world, and you have to understand that when we talk about the world, we're not just talking about the geometry of the house. There's the air in the house, the atmosphere in the house, the shalom bias of the house, the growth of the people in the house, their psychological state, their mental state, their spiritual state, all of that. And we have not done that properly. When we do that properly, we have Mashiach. And when we have Mashiach, we will understand why the plans were as they were, because at the moment it's very difficult to understand. Very difficult to understand suffering. Right? It's very difficult for me to understand why little Israel is that we're in the position that we are at war at the moment. Why? Why is it that a piece of geography which is smaller than Hobart is the center of world attention all through history? Why? Why is it that there's Robert mentioned it before? Where is this anti-Semitism? How many Yidden are there? There's 14 million Jews. There's 8.5 billion nefoshois on this planet. Who cares about 14 million Jews? Everybody. Everybody. Why? So we have to. We will. He said that's because they're Jews. We will know. We will understand. We will understand some of this when Mashiach comes, and we'll understand some of it with the Shia. So let me just, before we start, I'm sorry that we haven't even started the subject yet. Let me take you through it quickly again to summarize so that everybody knows. We've learned what oiros and kalim are, what lights and vessels are. We've learned what toyu and tikkun is, where you have unbridled energies which need housing, and that the housing can't be too severe, otherwise there's no energy left. And then we've learned that Seder Istalshalis, that it goes through 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Now, one last piece, Neshamas come from Atzilus. The human soul in general, the Jewish soul in particular, comes from Atzilus, comes from this level of Hashem's consciousness, where there's no creation yet, there's nothing physical yet, there's no house yet, not even a drawing. But we come from that level of godliness, which is called Atzilus. And then, as a neshama comes down, it either stops in one of those 4 worlds, or it doesn't. A tzaddik comes direct from Atzilus into this world, Olam Hazeh, which is Asiya, and other good men will stop in Bria, not so good men will stop in Yetzirah. Rishoyim will take stops in all 4 places until they get down here in their battered state. And that is a background to what we're going to learn. So, l'chaim. Okay, let's start with this. Yaakov has this life of terrific trouble, right? He has to fight his way with Esau, and then he has to go to Haran and live with Lavan and get cheated, and he gets cheated out of his wife, and he gets cheated out of his money, and he doesn't see his father for 20 years, and he loses his... So, and then, when he finally gets back to Eretz Yisrael, after all of this, he davens to Hashem for some peace. What's wrong with that? And it says that Hashem's not happy with that, and he is, as a result of that, his favorite son, which we'll come to in a minute, has all the trials and tribulations and tortures his poor father. His father thinks that he's been killed. The father sees that the brothers hate him. He thinks he's been killed. Finds out, and a lot of learning is that he had prophetic knowledge of what was happening to Yosef. And then, by the way, just as an aside, he spends the last 17 years of his life exactly with what he was davening for, this peace, this shalva. The last 17 years of his life in Mitzrayim were the best years of his life, begashmias, in physicality, and he got what he wanted. Why did he get what he wanted? The Rebbe points out that when a tzaddik asks Hashem for something, even if it's refused, an aspect of it is going to be granted because he's a tzaddik, and so he interferes with nature to some extent. So he ended up with actually what he was asking for. And then there's some more learning on whether or not he got it during that earlier period as well, because the prophecy was that Yisrael would go into Mitzrayim, into Golis, in chains. He didn't go in chains. He went very honorably. When finally Yosef was the viceroy of Mitzrayim and sent for his father came into Mitzrayim with great honor. And Paro even asked him to give him a bracha. So Paro knew who he was. And so to some extent, his request became his prophecy, and he got it. But in the main game, you have to understand that not only wasn't he granted that, but he witnessed terrific pain and difficulty and the question is why. And this is what we learn over and over again in Hasidus, that the first fundamental position that a Jew has got to get to is to understand that we don't think with Hashem's brain. Hashem's brain is infinite. We have a brain the size of half a rock melon shell. With a half a rock melon shell, we do unbelievable things, but they're limited, and they're gvul, they're limited. Finite is the word I'm looking for. Whereas we're talking about an infinite. It's like having, this is a moshel I've used a lot because I liked it when it was told to me. It's like having a pet dog at home, and the pet dog's become really a member of the family, and he sleeps on your bed between your legs, and you pat him and you feed him and he loves you and you love him, but try showing him your balance sheet. He's not going to understand your balance sheet. So we have a relationship with our God. The more we put into that, the better it is. The more it will be reciprocated, the same way as any love relationship is. But at the end of the day, we don't understand Hashem's balance sheet. We don't understand what happened before we were born. We don't happen with neshamas. We don't know what happens to those neshamas after they leave this guf. We don't know about previous gilgulim. We don't know about all the variables that Hashem runs with. Hashem isn't limited with his variables. So if one person is tall and therefore strong, it doesn't mean that Hashem can't make somebody else who is tall and weak. And the things that go together in our mind don't necessarily go together at all. They just go together because we're used to them going together. So our concept of what is good may not be Hashem's concept of what is good. And in fact often isn't. How do we know? Because we know that no bad comes from Hashem and we have pain. So how those two things stand together? It stands together because the pain is for some reason necessary. Do we understand that? No, we don't. So what? So we don't. Doesn't stop you believing in God, doesn't stop you doing the mitzvahs, it doesn't stop you understanding that you're a Jew and you have to live like a Jew and learn Torah and do mitzvahs. But There are points at which you have to draw a line and say, I don't understand. That is this lesson that we're learning with Yaakov. That Yaakov prayed for Shalva, and he got it at some level, but he didn't get it at the level he thought he should have. I'll give you an example. You want a house. You're dying to have that house. You've saved up for the house. You go to an auction and you're ready to buy the